Welcome to the Manchester Pavilion. It's really exciting to be here actually because we've got a fantastic panel of people who are going to contribute to a bit of a debate. We're going to show a short video in a few minutes and then we're going to go down the line of what we've got. All these stools, people have turned up, they're just here on the front row. Don't worry, we do have speakers. And so we'll be going down the line with lots of fantastic questions about some great regeneration projects that are happening, particularly in Bolton. Now, the title of this event is called Premiership Development, a level playing field. Now, it's a bit tongue-in-cheek. We've done this as a nod to the boroughs, if you like, that are often not perceived to be in the Premiership, but who feel that they offer so much to the region that they're trying to develop. There's remarkable regeneration progress happening, as we know, in many cities. We know Manchester's doing very well, Liverpool, and your Glasgow's and your Newcastle's. But actually, there's a whole tier of fantastic towns, big towns, and small cities who are starting to punch well above their weight. And I get more excited, I think, about those places than anywhere else. So the Manchester Pavilion is very much covering Greater Manchester, which we know has a massive catchment area of many towns that are trying to do some wonderful regeneration projects. Now, led by the Bolton Experience, we'll discuss this with representatives of the three town centres of Bolton, Stockport and Oldham, where very exciting things are happening. And also how development has been achieved with the council representatives and two developers who are very much active in Bolton. There's even going to be an exclusive announcement today about a new development that's taken place. So we're going to do the talk in two phases. The first part is very much going to be urban regeneration, right at the very top. And the second phase, you'll feel a little sea change in the conversation. We're going to start getting into housing in particular and the difference that can make to people living in those towns rather than cities. But before we kick off with the panel, we're just going to show you a 3 or 4 minute video. You can clap. It was good. Come and take your seat. Just like to invite all the panellists up to their stools. We're going to keep that film running on a loop in the background without any sound, just so you can keep updated about the projects that are happening. But I'm just going to run along the line of people that we've got here. So first of all, we've got Stephen Young, who's Director of Place at Bolton Council, a man who doesn't need any introduction really, but I will. Andrew Freddie Flintoff, cricketer and Director of Logic Developments, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Then we've got Mike Horner, Regional Director of Muse Developments. Adam Cunnington, CEO of Public Sector PLC. Then we've got Caroline Simpson, Corporate Director for Place from Stockport Council. And last but by no means least, Tom Stannard, Director of Economy and Skills at Oldham Council. Great video. We'll start with you, Stephen. Fantastic things happening in Bolton. Really exciting stuff. We saw some of the projects there. Can you just talk about them in a little bit more detail and what Bolton are doing to trigger a renaissance regeneration in that area?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, Bolton faces a similar problem that a lot of towns up and down the country face. What do you do with a sort of a burgeoning retail centre when that retail centre changes and people are shopping online, they're going out of town? So the council took the view to look at our town centre and master plan our approach to that particular space. So we looked to really collapse the retail core, have it in a much tighter area, but use the space that was vacated by the retail core to bring forward 5 intervention areas. So the council has borrowed £100 million over 50 years, which we're using as seed money. So we're not looking for any sort of developer's return on that money. That's just about bringing these sites forward. And it's about bringing in housing, it's about bringing in office developments, it's about bringing in student accommodation with some additional retail. So we've been working with a lot of developers over the last sort of 12 months or so to bring these sites forward. And I'm really pleased to announce that we're able to announce the first of those sites. That's the Church Wharf site, which was one of the sites that was on the screen behind me, and we'll be working with Muse to bring that particular development forward.
Which is fantastic, isn't it? A Muse development.
Absolutely brilliant. We're delighted and very, very, very proud with that one, George. And I mean, we at Muse, we like working in partnership with local authorities. The vast amount of the work we undertake in regeneration is in partnerships, and particularly when it's a local authority with sort of strong leadership and a clear vision. And they've very much got that within Bolton now, and the £100 million funding that's been announced by the council as well in recent months. And if on top of all of that you've got a great site such as Church Wharf is in the centre of Bolton, a key strategic gateway site, capable of a mix of uses including residential, potentially offices, workspace, and even a hotel, and all the public realm that will go with that, really change that part of Bolton. It's of a scale where we can really make a difference, and as part of that we can open up the River Crowle as well, so it's quite an exciting master plan.
But Stephen, just coming back to that kind of seed funding that you've put in, you're hoping that's going to regenerate in a massive way and bring in hopefully £1 billion worth.
Yeah, we've done the metrics on it. We think there's about £1 billion of investment that'll come into Bolton, obviously, so we'll get a return of 9 to 1 on the 100 million we're putting in. I mean, when we look at these sites, I mean, we're not centre of London, you know, we're not the centre of Manchester. There's always a viability gap, and for us, the council, the public sector, has to fill that void because nobody else will. So hence we brought the 100 million forward. The council's been really brave in terms of doing that, but we're already seeing with the relationship with Muse that's beginning to bear some fruit.
So, Mr. Flintoff.
Oh.
Good time to bring you in. Lancashire man, through and through. Preston, unfortunately, not Bolton.
Yeah.
You're now like, what I'm intrigued about, when you think about all the things that you've done, you know, massive cricketer, you know, stuffed Australia in 2005, obliterated them basically, won the Ashes, now a very famous TV pundit, you know, and now a property developer. So I'm intrigued to know what's more exciting, winning the Ashes.
You missed out. You missed out musical theatre. I'm in Manchester next week.
I was going to say, or touching Jamie Redknapp.
Oh, he's beautiful. Yeah, it has been interesting. All I ever wanted to do as a kid was become a cricketer. That was what I wanted to be. I wanted to play for Lancashire. I wanted to play for England, and that was it. I wasn't interested in playing anywhere else. And unfortunately, I retired at 31 through injury. And finally, my lack of fitness and weight caught up with me.
What brought that on, do you think?
I've no idea. I think it was when I moved to Castlefield at 20 and Barca opened. But yeah, it's been varied, and then since retiring I've been fortunate enough to work a lot in TV, various things, musicals, done a bit of acting. And then property has been something that I've been interested in all the way through. I've invested in property with different results through my career.
Why did you choose to do that?
I like it, to be honest. I like property. You know, housing, and you can see it. I know it's a bit of a cliche. You can touch it, and you know what it is.
It's a tangible thing.
And then probably about 3-4 years ago, we set up Logic Developments, along with my cousin Neil and Tony. And we were looking around. We acquired sites in Manchester, one we're about to bring forward in Castlefield for 380 residential units, probably a mixture of PRS and open market sales. We've got a couple of sites on the Mayfield development, which we're working with the council at the minute. Also a couple more city centre ones, one near the university as well.
Why aren't you working in Bolton?
Well, I'm going to get to that. And it's something I enjoy, something I'm really passionate about. The thought of seeing a building that we've been involved in and driving past it and seeing it, and adding to a city like Manchester, which has been so good to me over the years, and also getting to Bolton and the county of Lancashire. I'm a proud Lancastrian, like you say. You know, Manchester for me has led the way in showing what can be done. And the ambition of places like Bolton, I think have seen that and thought we can do that as well. I'd love to see Preston in the same boat as well, my hometown. I'd love to do something there. But Bolton, yeah, you see it. I've met Stephen at his office, seen the plans and what they want to do. And it's something we'd love to get involved in, to be honest. You know, its proximity to Manchester, upgrading the railway links as well. So yeah, I want to see the Northwest booming. I want to see Preston, Blackburn, Burnley. You know, that's what we're all after, I suppose. And if I can be involved in that, and Logic as a company, yeah, we'd love to get involved in Bolton.
Yeah, brilliant. Mike, let's talk about Muse for a little bit, because you've just announced, obviously, the development today, which is fantastic. But you've done a lot of work in the region, haven't you? You've done a lot on Lancashire.
Yeah, we've been around as a company over 30 years now in total, doing regeneration work. Historically headquartered in the Northwest, so that is really our backyard, the Northwest region, particularly in Manchester, more latterly in Salford, but working out in some of the greater Manchester boroughs as well as places like Blackpool and Preston and Warrington and others. And historically we've had a big scheme in Tameside at Ashton Moss. We're currently doing a great scheme in Stockport with Caroline. A new central business district really right next to the station, where we've brought forward a multi-storey car park to sweep up all the car parking that was sat on the site previously, so then release the sites for development. And then we've done a second phase which has involved a new office building of 60,000 feet alongside a brand new Holiday Inn Express hotel. The hotel is trading its socks off, is over 90%, the occupancy is doing really well, and the office building was fully let within 6 months of practical completion, which was fantastic, a massive vote of confidence in Stockport. And that's given us the confidence with the council to then go on and do another office building, which we've just got planning for, and the detailed design is working upon that. So yeah, we've been working in lots of different areas of the Northwest over the years, and we'd like to work in Oldham at some point as well.
So you're all pitching for work. I love all this. It's fantastic. And what do you think is...
I don't know.
What do you think is the main driver, though, for the success of those projects? Because I know there are various scales, but what do you think makes them work? What gives that sense of pride in those regions?
It's having, I think, the experience and expertise of a company like Muse, but working alongside a partner in the local authority in all of these cases that have a vision and really, really want it to succeed. And it's the developer not being greedy. Our model basically involves, we'll take a fixed return. We're happy to do that. We're not just going to do phase one, whatever money that makes, trouser it and walk off and forget phases 2, 3 and 4. We work as part of a multi-phased long-term master plan. So we'll take that fixed return and we'll recycle any surplus should we get better values than was in the original appraisal, and use that money back in that scheme to help subsidise, if you like, another phase which otherwise wouldn't have been viable. So we build up a relationship by doing that. We're open, honest in our approach. It's all open book approach, and you just build up those relationships, and your interests are aligned with your partner, so it tends to be successful.
Excellent. Adam, can we just talk about the role of public sector PLC in all of this?
Thanks, George. We've had a partnership with Bolton for 6 years now, and we have that on the basis of what we call insourcing. So we bring our team, we bring funding, resources and skills into the council, and then we work really collaboratively with our partners. So what are you trying to achieve? What are your objectives? What are the things that you really want to see happen? And then we work to find ways to make that happen. So over the period, we've got planning permission for, I think, 450 units worth of residential sites. We're now working on the first of our private rented sites, which for us is something we're looking at much more broadly with the first, I hope, of 1,000 planning applications for the year for low-carbon private rented housing across the rest of our partners. We're working on a series of portfolio-style projects. So again, looking at ways to drive value for the council. And then out the back of that project, we delivered a really successful scheme, Bolton Central, which sat between the transport interchange, which you saw on the video, and Newport Street. And the partnership was asked to look at this because the council had taken it to the market. Whilst there was a lot of interest, it was really difficult to find a way to make that work commercially. So we were able to say, well, look, we've got money that we've created within the partnership. We've got money that we can invest. We all believed that there was a market for the office that we put there. But of course, in a traditional sense, if you look to that and you talk to the agents and they talk about the uptake of office space within the town centre in Bolton, they couldn't say definitively, yes, there was, because there was a really short track record of uptake. So we all believed that something could happen. We went away, we got planning permission, we started building on the site, and before completion, it was fully pre-let at a record rent for 25 years. So it absolutely vindicated, I think, the belief that we all had collectively in Bolton and in the market there. So really successful, and hopefully then the template for more schemes to follow.
Do you think that's a lot of what's needed in places like Bolton to get something away that's a trigger, something that gives a bit of confidence and a bit of drive to prove that something can be done?
I think if you look at it the other way around, if you had a site that was sitting there with hoarding around it, doing nothing, that's as powerful a message negatively as actually getting in and making something happen. And I think that change and delivering change has really transformed the dynamic of that area. And we've seen other planning applications coming in, people investing in their properties and bringing the whole area up. So, having that belief and I think putting a stake in the ground and having that conviction is really the key.
Caroline, what progress has been made in Stockport?
So we're a number of years into £1 billion worth of investment in our town centre. As has been said, Stockport Exchange has been a real transformative project outside the station, so we're really connected both into the city and into London in Stockport, and that's I think what the council in partnership with Muse has done is proved there is a market for Grade A office space outside of the city centre. We built it speculatively with the council putting the funds in, and it's really proven to be a great success. We're already through planning with the next phase and we'll be on site later this year. But what we've been doing is finding lots of different new reasons for people to use our town centre. So development and regeneration is all about people. It's all about providing product and reasons for people to visit places. So there are lots of other ways the council has invested and developed in our town centre. For example, we converted an at-grade car park into a new cinema and food and leisure complex, which we opened just before Christmas, the Red Rock development. Light cinema are, again, another example, trading fantastically, so really outstripping their expectations. And another example of where, if we believe in the product, if we believe in the potential of our town centres, then people are coming back and starting to use, if you actually give the right reasons to come in. The council in Stockport also acquired our major shopping centre a couple of years ago, and that's not the easiest of assets to manage and think about the future, but we have to be brave and we have to start thinking about redevelopment and reuses of more traditional retail space. We've also got a historic core, great market area, and I think people have an affinity with their town centres, and we need to find ways of reconnecting people and rediscovering what beautiful assets and architecture we have, which is a real rival to some of our out-of-town competition. We need to really energise that and make use of it. We've got lots more in the pipeline, new bus interchange, which is a posh word for a bus station, but we're building a 3-acre park on top, and that provides a development platform for a residential block. That will be in for planning later on this year, and a major focus now on residential in our town centre. We're calling it town centre living, really creating that lifestyle. 39,000 people use Stockport Station, either coming in or going out every day. There is a market for some of those people to choose Stockport as a place to live rather than make the journey in. So lots of potential for Greater Manchester towns. The city centre is booming, the regional centre, but how powerful we could be with a surrounding set of successful towns. So I think there's a win-win there.
Tom, Oldham Town Centre. I've been many times. What are the plans
Glad
for
to hear
Oldham? What are the plans for Oldham?
Well, we similar to Caroline in some respects, George. We've spent a lot of time building up all those ingredients for livability in and around the town centre. I think those are critical to regeneration in the future. So the Oldham Old Town Hall converted very successfully to now a multiple award-winning cinema, not just your average out-of-town multiplex, but a heritage conversion, a destination people want to visit. Restaurants brought in as part of that. We're investing £50 million in a cultural programme with a brand new theatre, a revamped retail scheme at Prince's Gate, at Oldham Mumps and more. And all of that wraps around the Town Centre Master Plan project we announced earlier this morning, separate to this session, that we're taking to an OJU procurement in June, July of this year. And that's a significant project for a couple of reasons. It's particularly focused on livability. It's got a large residential component, 900 odd units built into that, a new civic hub based on One Public Estate concept and funding, and a revamp for our indoor market hall, which has been a long-running sore really for Oldham. Those of you who visited Tommyfield Market recently will know that well, George. Thanks. Yeah. Less said the better at the minute. But the traders, great engagement on that as a really imaginative project to bring forward in a first phase for that. I think what's different about the Oldham project particularly is that it's a large area. We're talking about 21 acres or so of land in the town centre, 5 very closely related sites, bang on the metro, 20 minutes in and out of the city centre. The beauty of it really, and the feedback we've had from lots of development colleagues, without mentioning any names sitting on this panel, is that the land assembly is relatively uncomplicated. We own all of that, so it's oven ready and something we're taking into that procurement in the summer.
So what's the biggest challenge then? I mean, what's the biggest problem that you see ahead to get that level of regeneration at a different scale?
I think the biggest problem is viability and is livability, really. And I agree really strongly with what Richard Leese was saying yesterday in a panel, that livability and getting the livability ingredients right is key to driving growth. And we know, for the same reasons as Stephen, same reasons as Caroline, that viability is an issue. We've got to intervene to make that viability work. We've put our covenant, we've put a huge amount of our land on the line as well as capital to make that happen. And at the end of it, George, we can see 1,300 jobs, we can see 50 million a year of GVA coming back in, and I think from the council's point of view, that's definitely a prize worth intervening for. And I think, although as the session's called Premiership Development, our football team, as you know, in Oldham is some distance away from being in the Premiership, but I think the scheme that we're putting forward is absolutely of Premiership quality, along with the others in the other GM town centres.
Well, I'm a Sunderland fan, so we're not talking about football. Not for one single second, to be honest with you. And that covers a lot of the regeneration stuff. Just keep some of your questions in mind if you have got them. We're going to do questions at the end. We'll have time for 3 or 4. But I just want to move on to the debate about housing a little bit, because I think you've covered all that regeneration stuff so well. I mean, as we know, there's a national housing crisis and a case for more homes in Manchester, in Greater Manchester alone. Current supply of new homes is in the region of 7,800 annually, compared with a projected need of over 11,000 per year over the next decade. Now, the Greater Manchester elected Mayor Andy Burnham has asked for a revised spatial strategy so that housing is both as affordable and widely distributed across Greater Manchester as possible. And I think that new plan comes out in June, I believe. So maybe this is a good time to talk about inner city living and homes and housing. It's amazing how much the conversation's moved on. When I think like in the 1990s, in places like Manchester, you probably only had a few hundred people who were actually living in the city centre. Lots of shops and lots of dead spaces above, and lots of derelict sites and sites that hadn't been developed. And you look at it now, that transformation through companies like Urban Splash over the last 20, 25 years has been phenomenal, really. But we need to be rolling that out, don't we, to get to the places like Bolton, Stockport and Oldham. What are Bolton doing to put housing at the forefront of that regeneration?
I mean, a key part of our regeneration plans for the town centre, the master plan, is going to be residential led. So about 1,800 units that we're looking to bring in as part of, addressing that sort of housing shortage and that housing crisis. I mean, Bolton, I suppose, is quite interesting in as much as there is lots of interest in doing housing developments in the town, but the interest is unfortunately in the wrong places in a lot of instances around some of the green belt. At some point, the councils are going to have to grasp that nettle and decide whether it's going to release some of its green belt to bring those housing numbers forward. But certainly a key part of our approach has got to be the town centre. It's got to be following the sort of example of Manchester and bringing that sort of residential town centre living back.
Because back in the day, before you had your Liverpool's doing well or your Manchester's doing well or your Newcastle's doing well, everyone went mad that you lost talent and young people to London. And now I think, I'm from Sunderland, and Sunderland gets really annoyed that we lose all the talent to Newcastle. And I can imagine that there's a lot of annoyance that you've lost a lot of young people and talent to central Manchester rather than staying there. So surely it's all about providing things that make people really want to stay and build businesses, create homes and stay in the area.
And you're right, it's more than just building units, it's about building that cultural offer, it's about having the right restaurants, the right sort of leisure facilities. So a key part of our thinking has been around that, not just bringing units to market, because that in itself just won't cut it.
What about Southampton and Oldham? Housing?
So in Stockport, we are seeing an increase of residential in the town centre, but over the last year or so, a lot of it has been through permitted development rights, so office conversions, which is bringing more people living in the town centre, but it's not always the quality that we want. I think we're coming to the end of that phase at the moment. There's definite potential, and we're about to launch a framework for town centre living in Stockport to set the bar quite high in terms of quality. So we want to really think about design, but also, as Stephen has said, what kind of amenity space. So part of our design for a 3-acre park in the town centre is creating that wider environment, that lifestyle, the livability theme that is central. But we do need to drive quality. To do that, we need to drive value. So there's a little bit of a kind of a circular discussion that could go on unless we intervene in some way, and similar to whether it's intervening in grade A office or leisure facilities, we really do believe that there is a market there, and we need to drive that market. What we want to do is work with like-minded developers, like-minded architects, urban designers to really help us think about what that kind of living space needs to be. I think one of the challenges is creating that new offer, complementing what's there in the city. Within Stockport, we are 7 minutes from the city centre. I say 12 times an hour. There's always a train there when you get into the station. And it's a really attractive environment. It's an offer that is an alternative to the city centre, and we need to create the product that people want to live. And it's not always about young people either. So we've got an ageing demographic.
Yep,
so what might be a new sustainable living offer for older generation in town centres with the Plaza Theatre in Stockport, great Art Deco building, great afternoon teas. There are other reasons why people might want to live in town centres as they're moving through their life. So what kind of a residential product might they want? And I think part of the challenge that we always have in regeneration is starting to think about what that future offer, what the next offer is, and try and create those options for people in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go on a rant about the housing crisis because we all know about it and we know what the problems are. I suppose what I'm trying to get out of you guys is, what are you doing that's maybe in a unique way that other places might not be doing it? Why should Bolton be the same as Manchester City Centre? Why should Stockport be the same as Bolton? So do you actually, as councils, do you really start to appraise what makes the place unique? I mean, one thing I've heard about Bolton all the time, and everything that I've ever read, is how friendly everybody is. And it's one of the friendliest places in Britain. I didn't even know that. I've been loads of times, and everyone was friendly, but I didn't realise how proud Bolton was of that it's just such a friendly environment to be in.
And it is, a big part of our brand strategy was all based around this notion of the Bolton family, and that's something that comes across when you do speak to people. It's an incredibly friendly place. It is very unique. It's very different than any other town in Greater Manchester, we would argue. We're blessed with quite a lot of green open space, quite a lot of beautiful moorland. It is close, like Stockport, it's very close to the city centre, so you can have that sort of urban living and that sort of quality of life offer as well. So we think that does make us really unique.
Freddie, coming to you, because you haven't been contaminated by the house building industry. You've come from a completely different angle. What do you think about the standard of homes and housing that's being built in Britain? Do you think we're making the provision that we should be for people coming through?
I think there's different levels. Talk about living, we just moved house ourselves and was looking at the options. We're tempted to move into Manchester city centre as a family of 3. One of the challenges is open spaces, safety as well. So we opted to move, well, in Altrincham and Alty, and I love it, close to Altrincham, jump on the tram, you're into town.
I'm intrigued, as a family, were you thinking about apartment living or a house?
No, we were, because we've travelled around a hell of a lot and been to all major cities, spent time in Melbourne and lived in apartments. It was fantastic as a family, we really enjoyed it. But I think getting back to, what we're trying to do with the stuff we're building, we want to build quality. We're talking about the money involved in property development, and I've had my eyes open, to be honest. I started on £2,000 a year at Lancashire. I was a cricketer. And then you think, one thing that we want to do is when we put a building up or we design something, we drive past it, we want to be proud of it. We want something which is going to stand the test of time. That people look at, because you do go to some places and you see some eyesores, don't you? And you wince every time you see them, and we don't want to be in that position. So for us, quality, also in keeping with the town or the cities in which we're building in, working with the heritage people, English heritage, and getting it right. So quality is obviously on ours, but I think there's some way we need to, or try and attract families into major cities such as Manchester, such as Bolton. Preston, I've spoken about trying to get people back into that city centre, because you walk around Preston, sorry, going about Preston, and everything.
It's always going to happen.
No, but everything's moved out. There's trading estates here, there, and everywhere. People don't have a reason to come into the city centres, and I think that's got to be something which we've got to attract people back into, shopping, but also living.
Mike, can we just talk about the type of housing and stuff that you get involved in as well? Because obviously, one of the concerns, I think, is about kind of suburban sprawl, and rather than focus on city centres, it's a cheaper and easier option sometimes to just build, let's be honest, noddy box housing on what might have been greenbelt land. It's normally not contaminated, less headaches. What do you think about the system?
Well, we don't get involved in the sort of family box, greenfield, suburban housing. We're really an urban regenerator. So we are delivering, in essence, a mix of sort of townhouses and apartments in our schemes. And some of the schemes are as small as sort of 22 townhouses up to blocks where we've got 199 apartments in one block. One of the reasons why I think the housing provision and the market out there is a bit broke is that the suburban family housing, the big estates, it is generally limited to such a few number of house builders out there, almost a cartel in the marketplace, who have the land supply, the land banks out there, and they sort of control that supply. But I think smaller players, and we're a smaller player compared to your Persimmons and your Taylor Wimpey's and these types of people and your Barretts, we can perhaps get involved in the smaller urban sites, but then the problems that then arise are they're brownfield rather than greenfield, so they do have the additional costs, as you say. But if you've got landowners who are realistic about their aspirations for land price, then there's a big potential market in urban centres these days in terms of who wants to live there, whether it's students, young aspiring professionals, older families, investors, for rent, build to rent. There's a lot of variety out there you can be building for. The biggest problem at the minute, as I see it, is quite simply construction cost. There doesn't seem to be any sign that they're going to drop soon. They're only really tending to go one way at the moment, which is a difficulty for the industry if we're trying to get homes out there for people in the mass market who can afford them. And that's the big problem. And I think
so you would say construction cost rather than land cost?
Well, it's a combination of both. But even when you've got a realistic land cost, you can get a bit of a shock when you get your construction tenders back into, we need to look at it. It's partly materials, it's partly labour, it's partly costs of imports, the drop in the pound. There's all sorts of reasons what it can be. And that is a challenge to the industry going forward. There's no question about that.
Can I ask, because you're doing more urban apartment developments, might be hard for you to answer this, but who are you generally selling to? Is it young professionals? Is it older people downsizing?
It genuinely is a mix. We've done some blocks where we've sold all to Far Eastern investors. For example, we did a block in the northern quarter in Manchester, 77 apartments. All 77 were bought by a Saudi Arabian investor who then sold them on. I think he's kept about half of them to rent and half sold on.
Surely that's not great.
Well, it's not brilliant, and we've had a different policy since that scheme. That was one of the first schemes. That's probably going back about 5 years now, 4 or 5 years ago. And the scheme we've recently done in Salford, there's 75 apartments in the scheme, and we've got a complete mix of buyers in there. And the youngest occupier is 7 months, and the oldest one is 77. Quite easy for me to remember that stat. But it was quite interesting. It just shows the diversity of people living in that block. And there are students in there, there are overseas students in there, but there are families in there. And there are empty nesters who've come back into the city centre from the rural, big semi-detached house. So a complete mix of people have bought in that scheme.
Adam, in the context of Lancashire, Bolton, Stockton, Oldham, Greater Manchester, what do you think the biggest challenges are when it comes to homes and house building?
No question, it's the viability point. It's just those issues that we talked about. Can you get costs down? Can you, again, it's the same debate that we had with office building. You look at the prevailing market, there's low quality housing stock, people come to value new houses, well, you can't possibly achieve more than this for it. So it's kind of somehow breaking that mould, but also I think potentially finding other ways of delivering housing. So we've been talking with Bolton and others about private rented units. If you can build a model actually around a rental income stream, then to a degree the capital values are a bit secondary, because you're really then valuing the income stream that's being created and looking at that to say, well, is that enough to create us a pot of money that can get these things built? So going outside of that traditional, the cartel of house builders we were talking about, we're working with our sister company, Net Zero Buildings. They specialise in schools. They're going to start building zero carbon houses for us. Finding ways that you can sort of navigate outside of that traditional industry, break the mould and find new ways of finding and financing. We're looking at putting together a fund, an investment fund that the public sector and our partners can invest into, that we can then put into housing. Good quality landlord, you will hear horror stories of terrible private sector landlords. If you've got a really good landlord who's actually invested in the people that are in there, perhaps longer term leases than you might get, you can change the dynamic of the market, I think, quite significantly.
Do you think we get a little bit, this is an open question actually, do you think we get a little bit too caught up in, I suppose, conventional ways of building houses and selling them and letting them out? I mean, is there a room for a kind of, I don't know, an Airbnb, a Uber disruptive model that could come in and do something in a very different way? I'm just throwing it out there as a thought.
I think that there probably is longer term, and we've been kind of experimenting with that model. But I suppose when you look at that, it's a great concept. It works to begin with in a kind of organic way, usually in very, very busy city centres. And back to the kind of challenges Stockport have had, that we've had the same thing with PD rights and office to resi conversions that then have attempted to go down that model but haven't quite worked. And I think, if you look at the construction costs challenges alongside land values and construction skill sector challenges, you've got to have a range of interventions to try and really incentivise the market to bring those different resi forms to bear on a town. And I think, in terms of the public sector contribution, that's partly a cash contribution into that, and it's some imagination on the design and the quality side, as we've all reiterated, really. But it's also about putting your land where your mouth is a simple way of putting it. And in Oldham's case, we literally, the council, are sitting with our HQ on our prime residential site, and that's why we've put that very much forefront as a resi opportunity in our master plan that we're putting out in the summer. And we don't see a future for us sitting there occupying the space that's got city centre views one way, the Peak District the other way. You can see that as a definite kind of contribution to livability longer term, whichever kind of model that's on residentially, I think.
I think we've got architecture on our side in town centres and in urban locations. I think we've got to think about using the kind of the heritage assets that we have, but reinventing them with the kind of creative and the clever design. And we've got to evidence that provides that product that people want to live in. So I think that's certainly something that, from a Stockport point of view, we've got bags of kind of personality in our town centre, bags of really a great architecture, but it's just not come to life again in the way that we believe it can. So I think that's certainly where we're focusing. And are there things, planning policy, that we can make life easy, we can de-risk some of the projects. We don't layer on lots of different requests around car parking, around open space contributions, all the things that actually make the viability that bit more difficult when you've got a complex site and the construction costs are so high. So what can we do within the public sector to give that confidence, but also practically de-risk? And there's lots of different ways that we can do that.
When you talked about de-risk, I was actually thinking, should we be taking more risk to make a more unconventional provision to young people? Because obviously they're petrified about buying a product which might not be of the highest quality, and we've talked about quality already, and being mortgaged up to the hilt in a relatively conventional way. So when you talk to young people at 18, well, actually the first time buyer now is about 35 years old, so it's not that young really, but when you think about live work and different methods of procurement and how you might live in different ways, I think it's an exciting time, but it needs to be design led. I'm not supposed to be chipping in like this, I'm just chairing. Have we got any questions from the floor? It's got to be some. Come on. Yes, sir. You have to speak up because we haven't got a handheld mic. Oh, no, we have. Hold it fairly good. Can you introduce yourself first?
I'm Jed Cowser from BDP. Obviously, the Manchester City Centre sort of development kind of landscape is just amazing. The number of cranes on the skyline, difficult to count. And it's great to see the sort of surrounding towns sort of bringing forward plans now for fantastic redevelopment, really kind of beautiful public realm, great use of historic buildings. To what extent do you guys all sort of collaborate and work together cooperatively? This idea about a greater Manchester is quite an interesting kind of idea that, I wonder if you can get your views on that.
Where was the question in there?
How much do you guys collaborate together and cooperate?
See. How much do you collaborate? I thought you were making a statement saying you guys collaborate, and I thought, oh, well, that's great. How much do you collaborate?
Well,
do you? Be honest.
I could just about see the question in that as well. I think the collaboration is really strong in GM. I think the narrative.
But do you really do it?
Yeah, we do, absolutely. A good example of that is the whole agenda about town centre renewal. We've been collaborating in the directors group about that for some time now, and there's different approaches to that in different areas, but it's a very, very practical thing. Caroline's led a lot of that. We've all been putting our two penneth in. And I think, in a sense, the commonality is that we're all facing, the term we're using at the minute is inclusive growth, really, for all of this, but it's really about spreading...
Is what? Inclusive?
Inclusive growth.
Oh, I love that.
So it's not just growth in the city centre, It's the same, it's the level playing field, really. So we're not just seeing growth in and around the city centre, but we're seeing spreading of the benefits of that growth and the benefits of that development. The big challenge we've all got that we're talking about in the property context is viability, market values, livability. Their agendas we've got in common and their solutions we can put in place in common for that, and that's part of the beauty of the whole kind of CA arrangement is very collaborative, I would say.
Excellent. Thanks for that. Any more questions? There was a hand round here before and it's disappeared. They've all gone shout. Can we get the mic just down here? Can you introduce yourself, sir?
Yeah. Hi, Vac Farouk Shoesmith. Caroline, you referred to that great example in Stockport of speculative build and a great success of the notion of build it and there will come. That build it and there will come. That's Kevin Costner, Field of Dreams.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. The question's coming as well. Will that sort of percolate through to Greater Manchester, Tom, Oldham, Stephen, Bolton, and is there a developer appetite for that to unlock some of those schemes that might otherwise not be viable?
Good question.
You've
just answered one. You can't do it.
Go
again.
for it. Yeah.
I was going to say, from our perspective, absolutely, the 100 million is for exactly that. You know, the office block that Adam was talking about before, that was a classic example. Went to the market, there was nervousness, we're not sure, so the council filled that void, and basically we've built it, and that's been let out over 25 years. We got a rent way above what we expect we were going to achieve. So absolutely, our approach is exactly that. It's a buy phrase that we use all the time in Bolton. You know, build it and they will come. So we are going to build another office block. You know, we are going to build this housing. We are going to bring these things forward to market, and the council will underwrite the risk around that. And we're confident that once we've built it to the high standard that we're talking about, we will get the people wanting to move into the town centre.
We've got time for one more question, if anyone has one. You're a shy bunch this afternoon. No more? Yeah. Stephen, do you just want to sum up, if you like, what the offer for Bolton really is? I know we've seen the great video and you've talked about it really eloquently, but I just want to give you a chance to kind of conclude really as to where Bolton sees itself going over the next 5, 6, 7 years.
I mean, the video really does speak for itself. Some of the attractive developments that we're going to bring forward. The first one with Muse is just the start of the journey. It's definitely not the destination. We can see ourselves with our close proximity to Manchester and the strong connections into Manchester. We know that the offer we will bring forward in terms of office and housing will be at a more affordable rate. So we can see ourselves as a really big, strong commuter town that will feed into Manchester and to Preston. Not forgetting Preston the other way, that's important as well. But you know, we can see ourselves positioning and be a real growing town, and you'll see a real renaissance in Bolton over the next 10 years.
On that note, if you go on social media, if you look at the hashtag #InvestInBolton, that's the big strapline for today really, because these guys have made a commitment of putting in £100 million of kind of trigger seed funding to kick everything off, but we're looking to raise 900 million quid as quickly as possible to make this happen. And it should happen. There's no reason why it shouldn't happen with this level of ambition, I think, and with the master plan that's been developed. So hashtag #InvestInBolton. I just want to thank the sponsors who are PSP, Muse, Midia, Harworth Estates and Blue Mantle Property. Before we say thank you to the panellists, you guys are all here to network. That's why we're all here. It's not just about having talks and debates. So we are going to have a networking session here. It was going to be down on the beach, but we flooded all that. So we're going to do it here for the next kind of 45 minutes to an hour. So you can all stay for drinks and exchange even more business cards. And any questions that you've got for the panellists that you didn't want to open up publicly, the guys are going to be hanging around for a while. I'll be hanging around for a drink. Freddie might hang around for a few more. And without further ado, can you put your hands together for the panellists, please? Thank you very much. Thanks for coming as well. Enjoy your MIPIM.